Okay, so we can start with only one place. We have to start with Charles Leclerc, Lewis Hamilton. So I don't know how the FIA, how the broadcast team, how literally everybody watching and paying attention to the race missed Charles flying off the track on turn one, gaining a massive advantage and only giving it back to Lando. Um, Obviously hindsight's 50-50, but if you guys go back to my TikTok page, I made a video literally as it was happening because it was blatant. So the cars end up four cross, and so you've got Lando, you've got Charles, Lewis, and Max. All right, now keep in mind Max came all the way from fifth. Lewis was coming in from third, and Lando was Lando. Forgive me. Um, Charles was already in second. And so by the time they got close to that first corner, there were four cross. Well, Lando makes the corner just fine. Lewis makes the corner just fine. Max and Charles fly off the track. Max gives his position back, slots in where he's supposed to. Not George, I keep calling because it's Lewis's old teammate, and so I kind of keep putting those together. But Charles gets off the track, gets in front of Lando, gets in front of Lewis, and slows down enough to let Lando by. But then if you go back and watch the replay, obviously he doesn't let Lewis by. That's not the point just yet. Because he doesn't let Lewis by, he kind of creates a log jam behind him where him and Lando scamper off. They're gone. Everybody else is kind of left with the mess that, if we're being completely honest, Charles created. So Charles created a mess, disappeared, and now there's crap going on behind him. So let's just talk about the rules first off. Charles has to be given a penalty for this. And because it didn't happen in the race, I'm a big fan of them giving him a penalty for the next race because he ended up gaining that advantage, getting second place based off of this. So he got second place points, and all the people behind him ended up having to deal with the nonsense. And so I'm under the firm belief that Lewis's 10-second penalty has everything to do with Charles and less to do with Max. So the way it should have worked is, regardless of how it turns out, now Charles has to give that position back to Lewis, and he has to work his way back into the race. Yes, that puts you into the mix with everybody else, but that's the position you ended up in by going off the track. He could have made that turn. He decided not to. Lewis left him space. He could have made the turn. He just decided he wasn't going to. So they should have went at the end of that turn, at the end of that lap. It should have been Lando, Lewis, Charles. That should have been the order. As the race played out, we see that didn't happen, and so Lewis ends up in third place at this point. So now that we've gotten to this point of the race stabilizes a bit. We keep going, and now we have Max versus Lewis. And so this kind of happened in a chicane, and so it kind of happened in a couple different ways. Listen, Lewis definitely cut the track, and so that's not in contention here. That's not an argument. However, if you look at the footage and you see how they kind of enter in, Max is ahead of the apex, of course. But just look at how he got ahead of the apex is what what I want people to understand. Max dive bombed in. Lewis was already basically starting to make his turn when Max's car suddenly appeared. And so Lewis has to basically get out of the turn in the middle of it while turning into the next chicane. So they go into the next chicane. Lewis does the same thing that Max does, but on this occasion, Lewis doesn't hold control of the car, which is what you have to do if you're going to keep the position. He didn't. Lewis also got off quite a gap by making that cut. So yes, he absolutely should have slowed down and allowed Max to get that position. But to get a 10-second penalty there is kind of wild to me because you literally just saw two different cars, Max and Charles, do the same thing the lap before. Or not the lap before, it was the first lap. But you understand what I'm saying. A lot of people are talking about, oh, it was a first lap incident. So, you've got to let a couple things slide. Not that. Not something where a guy can get all the way in front of the field. I mean, what if he'd have stayed in front of Lando? We wouldn't have had the same reaction. So why is it okay for him to get in front of one car and allow them to place back? but not get in front of the other one. So he didn't get any kind of penalty. And so he essentially got away with it. It wasn't even mentioned on the broadcast. That's the wild part. It just wasn't even mentioned. I was listening to the international broadcast, and so it may have been mentioned on the American broadcast, but for the mass amount of people that were watching the race, it was never even mentioned. So huge problem with the way that Charles got by there. But going back to Max and Lewis probably should have gotten a penalty there. Don't know if it should have been a 10-second penalty, but it would have made more sense if all those people got penalties. And so really, Ollie Berman probably would have ended up in P2. Who knows? Incredible drive from him. We'll talk about that a little bit later. So that's the first little piece of the race. What do you guys think about that? Obviously, I don't think anybody's contending that Charles should not have gotten a penalty. I think everybody knows that. Do you guys think that the penalty should follow along to the second race? Or do you think that the penalty should just be, it is what it is, we missed it? I think the FIA has a lot to answer for after this particular race. So we'll get into a little bit more of that later. But, the FIA has a lot to answer for, too. Okay, so now we got to talk about George. George, that incident. Okay, so first we'll start in the first part. So when they're four cross, and George sees those guys flying and going across the grass there, he makes a great point that there should be something. I'm not sure if Verstappen should have had to give the position back to him. I'm not sure if that's the case, but at the same time, you do get to see a lot of cars going off at turn one. And whenever those cars are doing that, you get the feeling that these guys are making a decision. It's not necessarily I couldn't make the corner or I had to use the escape. It's just this is more advantageous for me to go ahead and take advantage of this position because it's lap one. And I'm not going to get away with this, so I'm just going to go. Worst that can happen is I have to give a position back, but I can gain some positions. I can game the system a little bit. And, I feel like George is right to complain about that. And I feel like there should have been more complaints. I mean, as we talked about in the earlier segment with Lewis's thing, he did get on the radio and say, is there anything going to be done about this? And, of course, Ferrari does what Ferrari does. Oh, we'll get back to you. Nothing happens, of course. I'd love to have been in that debrief, by the way. So now we've got George, and he's making the complaints about that. Sure. I think he's completely right. The people in the beginning should have definitely given those positions back. But, it is what it is. So now we've slided into the race. And you've got Kimi, you've got George, and then you've got Lando. Or not Lando, Oscar. So Oscar is so far back, but he's basically on top of George at this point. And George is on the radio saying, hey, I've got more pace. Let me get past Kimi. If I can't get by Berman, I'll be happy to give the place back. That's not anything strange. We hear that in almost every race when teammates get close to each other. The guy behind says he's got more pace. They ask him to switch because the guy in front hasn't made enough impression on the guy behind. I heard so much nonsense online criticizing George for his radio. First of all, guys, that's a private radio. We're listening in on somebody's conversation. We have no right to determine what they say and how they say it in a private conversation. If you don't like what they're saying in that private conversation, I suggest putting the broadcast on mute so you don't hear what they're saying. But we're essentially being nosy. We're listening in on somebody else's conversation. That's like you're eavesdropping on somebody's phone call and they say something and so you jump in and be like, whoa, you shouldn't be saying that. Why are you listening? This isn't your conversation. So for those of you guys who are upset about what George was saying, relax. It's not your conversation. They're in the middle of combat. They're in the middle of, a motor race where there's a lot of adrenaline high. Things are going to be said. It's a sporting event. It doesn't bother me a bit how he said it. Mercedes was dead wrong. Dead wrong. You've got a very fast McLaren behind you. You've got the two Mercedes. You know that George has pace. And even if you're not sure, we know for a fact, because we don't know for a fact that he had the actual pace that he needed to get to Berman, but we know for a fact that Ollie had no problem keeping Kimi off of him. So George, as the team leader, should absolutely have been given preference there. And again, if he doesn't catch him, he'll let him by. And so Mercedes waits 4 or 5 laps, lets George cook his tires to absolute death, and then says, okay, go ahead and chase after him. What do you think's going to happen? Of course he's not going to catch the guy in front of him now. He cooked his tires. And then the audacity to get on the radio before they made the switch and tell George, hey, by the way, man, your rear tires are getting hot. Well, duh. You got me flying around behind this guy in dirty air. You got another car right behind me, so I'm having to defend. What exactly are you asking me to do here? So George had every right to be completely livid about that whole situation in his radio messages. There was radio messages. I agree with Max when he talks about this. Maybe we shouldn't be listening to him. I think it brings a lot of entertainment, and I love them. I love the radio, but I also don't complain about the radio. They can say what they like. It's a private conversation. All right, so let's get into the FIA. I feel like every week we've got something new that the FIA needs to kind of work on, but I think that like if the FIA were to look at their job positioning like any other job in the world where your performance actually matters, I think we would see changes. So with the FIA, their whole thing about safety is just making sure everything is 100%. We have to go to the letter of the law. Then you got stewards running across the track with drivers on the track. I mean, how does that happen when later in the race you have Carlos Sainz go off the track, literally pulls himself into the runoff area, pulls himself to the barriers. They've got the little reflectors to tell him where they're supposed to be. And he's exactly where but nobody ever goes off at that point. It's a slow corner. The yellow flags would have been fine there, but they decide, you know what? Let's go safety car. And when they went safety car, they waited. There's got to be a person who's sitting there looking at the action, thinking to themselves, you know what? How can I take this race and make it just a little bit worse? You know what? Let's wait until we finally get the battle we've been waiting for all race long. And then we'll throw the doubles. Now we'll throw the virtual safety car. That makes a ton of sense, guys. Like, what in the world is happening here? Like, I'm convinced whoever's in the FIA doesn't actually watch motor racing. Whoever's in the FIA doesn't actually pay attention to the races. What danger was Carlos Sainz, who wasn't in the car? What danger was Carlos Sainz in? What danger were the other racers in? We have double waved yellows already in that sector. So the drivers know what's going on there. We've got a battle going on somewhere completely different on the track. A battle we've been waiting for all race long. We finally get there. Max is this close to Charles. And the decision is made, let's go virtual safety car. Just to make sure that battle can't happen. I mean, it just, every time I see stuff like this happens, it makes me think this guy must be an IndyCar fan or something. He just don't want Formula One to shine. I don't know what's going on. Like, what are we doing stopping the race at that point? So, again, if the FIA was run like any other job in the world, the FIA would have something to answer for. They would need to answer for why Charles didn't get penalized, why Max didn't get penalized, why, who else went off the track? So we got we got Charles going off the track. 10-second penalty should have been had, for sure. If you're going to give it to Lewis, you got to give it to him because he gained a massive advantage, more than a massive advantage. Max flew off the track. He got no penalty. The FIA needs to answer for that. I need the FIA to answer why they got marshals running across the track with cars this close to him. Liam almost ran one down. Why is that happening? Let's answer for that. And then I also need to know why we're stopping a race when there is zero danger. We're making dumb decisions, guys. Like, so to all the new fans out here, okay? So the newer fans that have come in since Drive to Survive, you got to keep in mind that anytime you make a documentary, anytime you make a short series, anytime you make a series like they did with Drive to Survive, they're showing you the most impactful points of each race. They don't show you the cool down period where, you know, the cars are this far apart and it goes on for 15, 20 laps and no passes are happening. They don't show that part of the race during the Netflix series. And so I feel like it's the FIA, it's the production team, it's everybody's responsibility. With all these new fans coming in that don't quite know how the sport works yet, let's make sure that when there's a battle about to happen, we let it happen. Kind of like a couple weeks ago when F1 decided to cut away from the actual action on the track and put it on the people. I mean, it's just we're making dumb decisions, guys. All right. And so going into the next season, we need to really, really focus on not just changing the FIA. Forget changing it. Let's just make sure we're consistent with them. Make sure they have consistent rules, consistent when they're adjudicating the rules, and then also consistent whenever we're looking at how these things are going to be judged, how these things are going to be looked at. The FIA has got to do things the same way every single time. That's bar none. That's just the way it needs to be. All right, guys. Thanks again for joining me for this first, not first. It's our third or fourth. We're back now, so thanks again for joining me and returning for this podcast. What I was thinking about doing is we're gonna have about a 15-minute podcast reviewing the races after the races are done, kind of giving some thoughts after I have time to review them again, and then we'll have a quick little quick fire things that I'm not gonna talk deep about. But I do want to review this week. It would have been Ollie Berman. Ollie's the man. Took that position, and almost. I think he should have been in the second because of all the penalties should have been given out. But great race from him. Great race from Ollie. Things like that will be in the quick rapid fire, and then whatever questions you guys have in the comments, I'll throw at the end there too. But 2025 has turned out to be one heck of a year. 2026, I can't wait. We don't know what it's going to be like, but I can't wait for that. But let's make some predictions for the rest of the year. We got 4 races left, and we've got a 3-way battle between Lando, who's now in number 1 position, Oscar number 2, and Max number 3. Max is on a charge. Lando's looked great over the last couple of weeks, and Oscar has looked not so great over the last couple of weeks since the break. And so I'm going to go with Oscar. I think Oscar gets it back together. I think Oscar figures out what's going on with him in that car. It just seems to be driving differently for him. Or I don't think it's the confidence. I mean, I think he's cool. I think that he's going to pull this thing out. 4 more weeks left. I think that Oscar comes in. So give me your predictions. Don't wait until the races are over to come up with what you think would have happened. Give me your thoughts. What do you guys think is going to happen in the race? Make sure you like, subscribe, follow. We've also got a TikTok page, so follow us there as well. But keep posted, and we'll see you guys at the next race.